Well, if the majority of the pollution's coming from India and China, and they aren't getting on board with, all the climate stuff until 2030, and the US is down 25% on all of our emissions, and we're being good stewards and doing what we're supposed to be doing, that maybe it's not just carbon dioxide. There's other things. There's trade-offs. So like right now, what they're doing in the world, it's crazy. It's like Germany's cutting off using, gas and petroleum and stuff like that. And now they had a horrible winter. Russia, cut off their pipeline. So now they're back using coal. It has to do with energy. We all need energy, but there's a trade-off. But the best energy is the densest energy. And the best energy is nuclear energy. That's the cleanest.
Okay, so here's what I want to say.
Yeah.
Because I think what you're doing is and I love you, so this is like critique.
That's all right.
Brotherly critique. It's the trap that we fall into as Catholics.
Yeah.
We engage the scientific conversation, which we could engage, but as a church and from our church leaders, when we do that, we just get caught up in the wash of all the dispute, of all the conflicting voices and opinions, and because everybody can bring their data set and try to argue their point.
Use any data set to any one of their points.
So are there underlying truths? Well, one I would posit is, can people have an effect on the climate? Sure.
Yes.
We can have effect on the climate. Okay, great. As church, what should our voice be? Our voice should be the focus on this carrying of the cross and the individual's salvation, not grouping people up into a collective. You as a person, Jesus was thinking of you when he was on the cross, and it is for you that he died. And if it were just you that he would have died for, he would have still gone through everything that he went through for your sake. And so what you need to do in response to that is take up your cross and follow him, imitate him, be directed towards heaven, and so focused, this is C.S. Lewis's thing, you're so focused on heaven that you want to live this life the best that you can. Yeah. And if we remind people of that and we challenge them with that the dignity and the call to which you're supposed to live your life, then you're going to be better citizens here on earth. And so that's where I think the church has to always step back and say, and this is where I think Pope Francis gets caught up in the wash.
The problem is
because he wants to hop in,
and then we have to be on the defensive.
He wants to start critiquing either capitalism or advancing what people would criticize as socialistic tendencies or policies or communistic policies or economic schools. No, we don't need to go there. There are smart people who are going to have those conversations, but we're the ones that care for their souls.
That should be first and foremost.
That is our primary responsibility. Don't let the evil one trick you into thinking that we're ever going to get rid of the poor that are with us. What does Jesus say? The poor will always be with you. These problems that we have will always be there. What's important is keeping our eyes set on heaven, keeping our souls safeguarded, and living the life that God wants us to live. That's what we have to keep getting called back to. So whether it's like the reforms of post-Vatican II that went a little soft and we were trying to appeal to people in culturally acceptable ways, we declined. We lost people because the challenge was watered down. Whether it's with this climate change thing, don't get caught and caught up in the issue. No, keep calling people back to this idea that we are made for more. And because we're made for more, how are you going to live the best life that you can now? And so if you're going to do that, you're going to remember that God put you as a steward over the environment. So you have a responsibility environment, and how you choose to act reflects on your family, your community, your workplace, your et cetera, and the neighborhood that you live in.
But I guess where I was trying to get to is where I was getting to is the practical of it. Is those things are true, that if you have a relationship with God and you see the world as a steward.
Yeah, but we don't have to talk about the practicals.
Well, you have to,
because we're not.
Because this is what happens. So it has to be practical. Because if I want to be able to take care of my environment, because I should, because God's calling us to take care of the world, but I can't even put food on my table and I don't have anything. The people who are polluting the most are people who don't have enough resources. They're not even thinking about the environment because they can't. So if the best way to help the environment is to help the lowest up. And it isn't top down, punishing the people on top down. It's helping those who are the least, the vulnerable.
Be more concrete.
So, for example, the average people don't start caring about the environment until they have more than $4,500 in a year. Like once they get to that threshold, then they can look to the future of their kids of like, hey, this river needs to be clean or this thing. But if I'm cooking with dung and wood and coal in my own hut, I'm not worried about the future. I'm worried about hand to mouth, what today I'm going to do. And we want to be focused on those things, trying to build those people up out of poverty. My second point would be that the whole argument in itself is all negative. It's just doomsaying instead of ever leading with any of the good. If we look what's going on in Africa, 300,000 people a day are getting clean water, that, more and more people are getting lifted out of poverty. How is this being done? This is the miracle that no one's talking about. And we're just focusing on the things that sell in the news, which is catastrophe. It's the world's going to end. They're saying the world's going to end for 12 years.
Well,
How good is that to hope for
sells.
people? Yeah, but it's also—
if hope sold, it'd be on the front page of the New York Times.
It's traumatizing to youth thinking that the planet's going to be over with. It's like, instead of saying, hey, what are practical things we could do, helping people.
See, but here's where the climate change issue, we have to be careful as church, because the climate change issue—
that's what I say.
is
It
becoming
shouldn't be a church issue. In a general stewardship issue. But getting in that realm, it's tough because the
climate change issue is becoming an issue that is being used for power and control.
That's it.
Full
it
stop.
Shouldn't be used. The church.
So if it's being used for power and control, it's being usurped, because we started by saying that, can humans affect the climate? Yes. Do humans affect the climate? Of course. Yeah. We're creating. When you create, you emit. So those are conversations that could be had. But that power and control, that's where we have to be careful, because those are the things that we can speak to as church, because it's something that's at the heart of what sin is. It's pride. It's this idea of, I can have power over other people. I can exert over other people. So where the church's voice in that conversation comes in is always maintaining the dignity of the individual's ability to speak freely, which was enshrined in the Constitution as inalienable rights. You speak, you can own property, you can have freedom of religious assembly. Those are the things that you can't usurp or wash away when you're trying to have conversations like, climate regulations, et cetera.
And the church backs up private property. I mean, all throughout, from Pope Leo XIII to St. John Paul II talks about that it's okay to have capitalism, but there's a responsibility to take care of other people. And I just think that if we want to be practical, and if the church is going to step into these things, that we're going to have to also come with a different message of hope that, hey, you know what? God ultimately is in charge. Trying to think that man is so much involved. Yeah, it could be, but God's so much more involved. It's like he made the universe in 1 second, and you don't think that he could straighten it out in 1 second? That's just the hope that I have. But on a practical level, like I said, if we want to help the economy, we want to help the poorest people get out of poverty the fastest, and then they can turn their eyes to things of the future, which is their homeland or whatever it is. But can we all be better stewards?
That's where the principle of subsidiarity is
exactly important. That's it. It's not all solidarity. It has to be subsidiarity together with it. And explain that to people.
Okay, you want me to do it? Subsidiarity is the idea that social change can happen in this context that we're talking about. Social change can and should happen at the smallest level possible, because that's where it has the most impact and is, if you will, the purest. And so if you're trying to clean up a neighborhood, you don't start with federal government regulation. What you do is you go to that neighborhood.
Your HOA.
Yeah, and you talk to your HOA, like seriously.
Start small.
Or in your school, like if there's issues in the school. You don't start at the state level, you go to the PTO, you start with families. You start at the levels that have the most direct impact and
guess who's
ability to influence a situation.
Guess who's using that word?
And then you build up from there.
Jordan Peterson has been using that word over and over again. Once he found out what it meant, he's like, holy cow. He's been using that word nonstop over and over again, subsidiarity. Yeah. I like the G.K. Chesterton line. I've been always hammer him is I like my politicians close so I can kick them, because that's the only way that they listen. Washington, D.C. is not going to listen to you. You can't write an email to your congressman or your senator or the president. They're not going to listen. But the mayor or your councilman, if you have a problem, you start there. You work those issues first. And that's where local politics are important. Your school board, the people who are on your parish council, or different things like that, that's where most of the change. Solidarity is more for those overarching, those things like, climate and stuff like that. So that's where it gets hard, because there is solidarity too, the other side of it, which is hard, but it's a balance. But it's one of those things that God set up like that. That's how Moses was trying to do everything top down in Exodus. And eventually his father-in-law, Jethro, comes to him and says, hey, you got 1 million people here. You can't adjudicate every case of this guy's got my sheep and this one did this and this guy had this happen. He's like going crazy. He's like, you just can't do it. So what does he tell him? He says, appoint groups, heads of 10, heads of 50s, heads of hundreds, and heads of thousands, and then have these people in charge so that they can start at these lower levels to try to work it that way. This is God's plan how to do it. There's a hierarchy to it. But I think where we're missing the idea that it's a both and. We also need to take care of people who are far away, but the most efficient way that the church has taught us is to help myself first, then my vocation as a father and a family, then maybe my block, then my workplace, then the city, then the county, then the state, then the federal government. It's easy to go, I'm against climate change. I'm going to donate money to X, or I'm going to help poverty. I'm going to send a check to starving children. But no, it's different versus locally on the ground level. You know what? I'm going to go to my local river and I'm going to get 20 people together and we're going to go clean the river ourselves. Or you know what? We're going to lead some kind of recycling drive. We're going to do a paper drive, or we're going to do something where we could see and being part of the actual process. You know, God wants us to be, you know, on mission with him, but that means that we have to be involved in actually not just cutting a check, which is good and necessary. But I think that's part of where we lose it, because it's hard to do those things, to give up a Saturday to actually do action or to be involved in cleaning up your local beach. You know, I work for the city, so that it's disgusting what people do and throw the stuff out. So I have a personal attachment to it, because as soon as the snow melts, it's gross. But has anyone ever said, you know, this is my community? You know, when I moved to Cherville, the snow melted, there was garbage everywhere. I grabbed the garbage picker myself and I went and picked up 7 bags of garbage. I'm like, it's gross. I'm not going to look at it because this is my community. That's the kind of stuff I think God's calling us to do. And that's how we can actually, you know, make a difference. But it's hard to make a difference in climate change, which is like an abstract idea. It's like, it's so far away, it's hard to be tangible. And it's easy to do that and to point fingers and to cause that. But for me, it's like, if you want to have the kind of change on that, like Father Mileta said in his homily, he did a homily on Laudato Si. What did he say? Stop drinking water bottles. I don't drink plastic water bottles. Number one, microplastics are gross. You shouldn't drink them. You don't know how much hot and cold has been in that little thin plastic and how much that's getting in your body, number one. And most of that ends up in the ocean. Number two, get yourself a nice cup. This isn't like a Stanley. I paid $50. You get one of these for like $10. You know, all the kids want the Stanleys are $50. But I reuse this over and over again. Start with yourself. You know, stop buying a case of water because it's convenient, so you can take it and chuck it. Start there. Start little. You know, that's what, you know, denying yourself and picking up your cross is that you have to build up to those things. You know, that's Jordan Peterson's message, is like, clean your own room first before you want to go criticize the whole entire planet of the existence of the temperature in this complicated thing that we have no idea what's going on. Start with what you can do. What can you do? Can you clean up your school? Can you clean up your own yard? How about your neighborhood? What about the lady down the street as a Christian? What she can't, you know, do her bushes. Can you help her? Let's do those kinds of things, you know, on my soapbox here. But that's what I'm passionate about, like those kinds of things, because that's what I can affect. But those are hard. It's hard to get up on a Saturday and to, you know, to use your own energy to go do something. It's a lot easier to criticize the world and feel superior. I'm so good because I put on my Instagram that I'm for, you know, whatever, climate change or whatever the thing of the day is, and to be a, you know, virtue signaling versus actually getting in the ditches and doing the work.